I'm 41 years old, married for 14 years, 2 kids, a house in a quiet neighborhood. Until about a year ago, I thought my life was normal. Not perfect but stable. Predictable in a comforting way. My wife, Emily, and I had the usual routine. Work, kids' homework, groceries, Netflix at night. The kind of life where nothing dramatic happens and you kind of assume that means everything is fine. Looking back, I realize how naive that sounds. The whole thing started with something stupid. A clogged kitchen sink. Water was backing up and making that awful gurgling sound like the pipes were choking. I tried the usual stuff, plunger, baking soda, hot water. Nothing worked. Emily told me to just call a plumber. So I did. A guy named Jason showed up 2 days later. Mid-30s maybe, tall, easy smile, the kind of guy who talks like he's known you forever. He fixed the clog in under 30 minutes. Before he left, he looked at me and said something that didn't mean anything at the time. Yeah, you definitely had a blockage. Funny thing is, he wasn't wrong. Just not about the pipes. At first, Jason coming over felt like a completely normal service call. He checked the pipes under the sink, ran some kind of metal snake through the drain, pulled out a disgusting knot of grease and food. Emily stood in the kitchen talking to him while he worked. She's always been friendly with people like that. Delivery drivers, repair guys, waiters. It's one of the things I liked about her when we first met, she could talk to anyone. But I remember one detail now that I didn't question back then. She laughed at something he said. Not just a polite laugh. One of those real laughs. The kind she used to give me years ago. I was sitting at the table answering work emails and barely paying attention. Just background noise. When Jason finished, he wiped his hands and explained the problem. Grease buildup, he said. It happens slowly. People don't notice until it completely blocks everything. Emily asked him a few extra questions. More than necessary, honestly. But again, at the time, nothing about it seemed suspicious. Just a plumber doing his job. Just my wife being friendly. Just another Tuesday. After that first visit, life went back to normal. At least that's what I believed at the time. Jason's name disappeared from my mind almost immediately. The sink worked again, the pipes stopped making that awful choking noise, and I moved on with work deadlines and the kids' soccer practices. Emily, though, she mentioned him again a few days later. Jason said if we have any other issues with the pipes, we can text him directly. She told me casually while washing dishes. I remember shrugging. Good. Plumbers are impossible to book anyway. That was it. Conversation over. About 2 weeks later, the downstairs bathroom started leaking slightly under the sink. Not a big deal, just a slow drip. Emily immediately said, "We should text Jason." Not call the company. Text Jason? I didn't think twice about it. Honestly, I was relieved someone else would deal with it. He came by that Friday afternoon, while I was still at work. When I got home, Emily said he fixed it quickly. She added something else too. Nice guy. I agreed without thinking. I had no idea how much that nice guy was about to cost me. Over the next couple of months, Jason showed up 2 more times. Once for a slow drain in the bathtub. Once because our water heater was making a strange knocking sound. Looking back, I still don't know if those problems were real or just convenient excuses. At the time, it all felt routine. Emily would text him. He'd come over. Sometimes I was home. Sometimes I wasn't. Whenever I was there, the dynamic felt friendly. Maybe a little too friendly, but I ignored the thought as soon as it appeared. Jason joked a lot. Emily laughed easily. He'd say things like, "Man, these houses hide problems everywhere," while crawling under sinks or behind appliances. One afternoon he looked at our basement pipes and said something strange. "Stuff builds up slowly," he told me. "Most people don't notice until things stop working completely." I laughed and said, "Sounds like relationships." He smirked but didn't answer. Emily, though, went very quiet for a moment. I noticed it. But I told myself I was imagining things. Turns out, I was noticing exactly the right thing. The first real red flag came from something stupid. Her phone. Emily had never been protective of her phone before. For years it just sat on the kitchen counter or couch like any normal object. Then suddenly, it was always face down. Always within arm's reach. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People change habits. But then one night I woke up around 1 a.m. and noticed the glow of her screen in bed. She was turned away from me, typing. When I shifted slightly, she locked the phone immediately. "Who are you texting?" I asked, half asleep. "Sarah," she said quickly. "She's stressed about work." Sarah was her best friend, so the answer made sense. Still, something about the speed of that reply stuck with me. A few days later, I saw a notification flash on her phone while she was in the shower. Just one word. Jason. My brain didn't immediately jump to cheating. Honestly, my first thought was plumbing again. But there was a little smiley face next to his name. And plumbers usually don't send smiley faces. I didn't confront her about it. That's the part ones still replay in my head sometimes. Maybe things would have been different if I had asked right then. Instead, I did what a lot of people do when they're scared of the answer. I pretended everything was normal. But once you notice something like that, it's impossible to unsee it. She started stepping outside to take phone calls. She'd say things like, "Just work stuff." But Emily worked in accounting. Nobody calls accountants at 9:30 at night for emergencies. One Saturday afternoon I came home earlier than expected from the grocery store. Her car was in the driveway. But she wasn't inside. I walked through the house calling her name. Nothing. Then I heard voices outside. In the backyard. When I stepped onto the patio, Jason was standing near the back door, toolbox on the ground. Emily looked startled when she saw me. "Oh," she said quickly. "Jason stopped by to check the water pressure." I didn't remember calling him. But I smiled anyway. Because apparently I was the last person in my own house to understand what was happening. That moment in the backyard sat in my stomach like a rock. Jason acted completely normal. "Hey man," he said, nodding at me like we were old friends. "Your pressure valve's been acting weird. Just wanted to double-check it." I didn't even know we had a pressure valve. Emily stood a little too close to him while he explained something about pipes and pressure regulators. Every time I asked a question, he answered confidently, throwing around technical words that made it hard to argue. I felt stupid standing there. Like the only guy in the room who didn't understand what was happening. Eventually he packed up his tools and left. Emily immediately started making dinner, talking about the kids' schedules like nothing unusual had happened. But something had shifted inside me. Later that night, I asked casually, "How often do you talk to Jason?" She barely looked up. "Oh, you know, sometimes if something with the house comes up." Then she changed the subject. And that's when the suspicion really started growing. Like something slowly clogging a pipe. The real turning point came about 3 weeks later. It was a Sunday morning. Emily was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't planning to check it. Honestly. But the screen lit up, and I saw the name again. Jason. I wish I could say I ignored it. I didn't. I picked up the phone. The message preview was short, but it felt like someone punched me directly in the chest. "Last night was worth the risk." That was it. Just one sentence. But suddenly 100 small moments from the past few months rearranged themselves in my head like puzzle pieces snapping into place. Her late-night texting. The backyard visit. The way she laughed at his jokes. My hands were shaking when I put the phone back exactly where it had been. The shower turned off a minute later. Emily walked out wrapped in a towel, completely unaware that my world had just tilted sideways. I stared at her like I was looking at a stranger. And she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I spent the rest of that day pretending to be normal. Inside, though, my mind was running in circles. Maybe I misunderstood the message. Maybe it meant something innocent. Maybe they were talking about a job or a repair. But deep down, I knew better. That sentence didn't sound like plumbing. That night, while Emily slept, I checked her phone again. The conversation thread with Jason was long. Longer than I expected. Scrolling through it felt like slowly peeling my own skin off. Flirty jokes. Late-night messages. Memes. And then photos. Nothing explicit, but enough to make the truth obvious. One message from her hit me the hardest. We just have to be careful when he's home. He. Not my name. Just he. Like I was some obstacle instead of her husband. I sat there in the dark reading everything until my chest felt hollow. And that's when the sentence Jason said months earlier came back to me. You definitely had a blockage. Yeah. Turns out he was right. I confronted her the next evening. I didn't plan some dramatic speech. I didn't yell. I just walked into the kitchen where she was chopping vegetables and said quietly, How long have you been sleeping with the plumber? The knife stopped moving immediately. She froze. For a second, she didn't even turn around. Then she slowly looked at me. What? Her face was pale, but she tried to sound confused. I pulled her phone out of my pocket and placed it on the counter. I read everything. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours. Finally, she sat down at the table and started crying. Not denial. Not anger. Just crying. That's when I knew the truth was worse than anything I had imagined. Between tears, she whispered something that still echoes in my head. It just happened. Like affairs are thunderstorms. Like they just appear out of nowhere. Once the truth started coming out, it didn't stop. Emily admitted they had been seeing each other for almost 4 months. 4 months of texts. 4 months of secret visits. 4 months of me shaking the guy's hand while he stood in my house. Apparently it started with flirting during one of his repair visits. Then coffee. Then just talking. Then a hotel. She kept repeating the same sentence. I didn't plan this. I laughed when she said that. Not a funny laugh. More like the sound someone makes when their brain breaks for a moment. You literally texted him to come to our house, I said. She cried harder. Then came the part that made everything feel even more surreal. Jason apparently told her something during one of their meetups. She repeated it to me through tears. He joked that your relationship had a clog, and he was helping clear it. That was the moment I realized my humiliation had probably been a running joke between them. And I felt something inside me collapse. Anger came later. At first I was just numb. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I had walked into someone else's life. Every room had a new question attached to it. Did they talk here? Did he stand here? Did they laugh about me in this kitchen? Emily kept trying to talk. Trying to explain. It wasn't about you, she said at one point. I remember staring at her like she had just spoken another language. Of course it was about me, I replied. You cheated on me in my own house. She said she felt lonely. Said our relationship had become routine. Said Jason made her feel noticed. Those words hurt more than the affair itself. Because I thought I had been noticing her. Working for our family. Raising our kids. Building the life we had. Apparently that life had become background noise to her. Just like Jason had been background noise to me when he fixed the sink. The next few weeks were chaos. We tried therapy. We had long emotional conversations late at night after the kids went to sleep. Emily said she had already ended things with Jason. I actually called him once. Worst phone call of my life. He answered like nothing was wrong. When I told him who I was, there was a long pause. Then he said, Look, man. I didn't mean to mess up your marriage. Like it was some minor inconvenience. Like he accidentally dented my car instead of sleeping with my wife. I hung up before I said something that would ruin my life. Emily begged me not to leave. Cried every day. But something fundamental had shifted in my head. Trust isn't a light switch. Once it's broken, every memory starts rewriting itself. And suddenly 14 years of marriage started feeling fragile. Like pipes that had been corroding slowly the whole time. We're still technically married. That surprises a lot of people when they hear the story. But things are different. We sleep in separate bedrooms now. We're polite. We co-parent. But emotionally, something essential between us died the day I read that message. Emily says she regrets everything. She says it was the biggest mistake of her life. Maybe she's telling the truth. But regret doesn't magically rebuild trust. Sometimes I catch myself watching her the way you watch a stranger. Trying to figure out who she really is. The weirdest part? The sink clogged again a few months ago. For a second I actually thought about calling Jason. Then I laughed out loud at the absurdity of that thought. I ended up fixing it myself with a cheap drain snake from the hardware store. Turns out the blockage was just grease again. At least this time I understood what I was dealing with. If you had asked me 2 years ago what could destroy my marriage, I would have said something dramatic. Financial ruin. Serious illness. Some huge life crisis. Not a plumber. But life doesn't fall apart in cinematic ways most of the time. Sometimes it starts with small, ordinary moments. A repair visit. A friendly conversation. A few texts. Looking back, I realize how easily trust can be taken for granted. I believed our life was stable because nothing seemed wrong on the surface. But apparently problems can build up quietly. Just like grease in a pipe. Slowly. Silently. Until one day everything backs up and floods your entire house. I don't know if Emily and I will ever fully recover. Some days I think maybe we will. Other days I feel like I'm just living next to someone who used to be my wife. But one thing I know for sure. If someone tells you there's a clog, you should probably check where it's really coming from.